Christmas. So thank you very much for sparing the time today. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction first of all, because obviously it's not me that you've come to hear, it's Aileen and Paul. But my name is Jill Alco and I am one of CIH's regional managers. Under normal circumstances, I cover the East Midlands, the West Midlands and the South West. But during these periods of sort of the COVID months, I've tended to do things more on a national basis, including things like our virtual membership roadshows. So it's great to see so many of you here today and representing lots of different organisations throughout the UK. So it's great that we've got representatives from all the UK countries. So thank you for coming along. It's great to have you here. I'm going to be joint chairing the session today with my colleague Lisa Fleming, who's based the engagement manager based in Wales. The session, in terms of how it will run today, we are going to record this session, which is great because it'll mean that you can sort of refer back to it. Also, we do like to take some photographs during the session for things that we do on social media. So it's quite nice to put some stuff on Twitter in terms of sharing the experiences that we're having as part of our membership roadshows. So if anyone is opposed to that, could you potentially sort of like just let me know, and then maybe even turn your camera off if that was the case. But it's just the odd snap here and there. We do want to make this session as interactive as possible, and when we were doing a practice session for it, we had such fun. It really was a great laugh. So we're hoping that you're going to have a nice session this morning, a nice session for a Friday, but whilst also learning a lot as well. So the format of today's session is Aileen's going to be posing some questions to Paul. So it will be going in a sort of in conversation with style. So what we'll be hoping to get out of it is sort of shared experiences from Paul and Aileen, their choice of making a career in housing, and some things around membership and in terms of how that supported them as housing professionals throughout their career. So it will be very light-hearted, but we hope that you will take a lot away from it as well. So going back to the fact that we want it to be as interactive as possible, what we'd like to do, because there's probably too many of us on the chat at the moment to sort of do personal introductions, could I just ask you to use the chat facility, first of all, to introduce yourself to one another. So sort of we obviously can see your names, but perhaps the job that you're doing or the organisation that you work for, and what you'd like to get out of today. So if there is any particular questions that you would like to find out, please do put that into the chat, because like I say, we want you to get as much out of this session as possible. And it'd also be quite helpful for us as well to understand whether you're a member or a non-member, because I can't tell sort of from the list of delegates here today, but that would be really helpful for us because it also helps us to sort of frame some of the content. So it will start with the in conversation, which is the majority of the session this morning, but we will leave plenty of time for you to pose any questions to Aileen and Paul whilst they're here. And if I can just urge you to please do use that opportunity while we've got them here in our virtual room before we set them free later on. So do take the opportunity to ask them questions. And then we have also got a PowerPoint presentation that Lisa and I have got ready, which is based on membership services and professionalism. So depending on sort of how it goes through this morning, we have got that PowerPoint there that we can use it to sort of zoom in on particular aspects of membership services. So we'll see how that all goes, but please do start off by introducing yourself on the chat, whilst I then introduce our two main guests today. So delighted to have you both along. Thank you very much for being our star guest today. So first of all, if I can introduce Aileen Evans. So Aileen is the CEO of Grand Union Housing Group and is also the CIH president. Paul Diggory is a freelance writer, a consultant, and is also a member of CIH's governing board. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to them and enjoy your session, and we'll be in touch throughout the hour.
Hello, everybody. It was a hoot when it was the best start to my week that I've had in a very long time when we introduced or we practiced for this session on Monday. And you mentioned, Jill, in your introduction that Paul is now a freelance writer, but you don't just write about housing, Paul. What else do you write about? And tell me how that relates to housing.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I think my interest in writing was sort of always there, but like a number of hobbies, disappeared as you advance in your career, and you don't have so much time, and you know, your kids come along and that sort of thing. And it was really when I became president, and actually my claim to fame would be as the CIH's first blogging president, because it was back in 2007-8. And so when I was sent on some far-flung trips to all corners of the UK and places like the Far East and even South Africa and Canada, I was able to post back blogs about what I was doing, what I was seeing, what I was getting involved with, and people used to comment on those. So it was just at the early stages, I think, really, of that culture. And I always wanted to write something a bit more substantial, like a novel, but time just didn't allow it. And the one thing I did manage in about my last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years of my main career, while I was a chief executive at North Wales Housing, I did a travel blog on a website, and my alias was Guidebook Gollum, which was a name my brother-in-law gave me on a holiday once because of my sort of obsession with finding all the best cafes and bars and things. And that grew into some ideas for a novel. And this year I finally published self-published my debut novel called Outside Lola's. So you can find out all about it at pauldiggory.com, nice and simple. And it's just my misfortune to have published what I thought was a decent holiday read a month after lockdown, when there's no travel possibilities or anything. But it's been good. I've really enjoyed doing it, and I'm now working on a memoir. In fact, I've written 19 chapters of a memoir that looks back at my 15 to 18-year-old self, and that actually goes back to almost to the start of my career in housing and how I came to do that. So
tell us, because you really properly chose a career in housing. You know, we often hear people who say that their housing career was their destination and they thought about doing something else, but they landed in housing and liked it. But you properly chose it, didn't you? So tell us about that. Tell us about you choosing that.
Yeah, I first had to sort of unchoose it. I was unlucky in a sense. Now, because of my interest in writing and trying to get better as a writer, I tend to look at anything posted by other writers and so on, see what I can learn. And the other night on TV, Tony Warren, who is the creator of Corrie, or for the uninitiated, Coronation Street, said that when he was young, he sat around listening to his mother and her friends gossiping, and that's how he learned dialogue. And I could make perhaps a similar claim about dialogue, but actually, the one I used to sit around listening to my mum gossiping with her friends. There'd be about half a dozen of them, and of course there'd be cigarette smoke filling the room, there'd be coffee on the go. They used to cook my mum's because she had the best cake, which is important, as we all know. And what I learned was that I definitely, under no circumstances, wanted to work in housing. That would be the last place I'd work, because the amount of time they spent rubbishing the local authority housing team and the repairs team, they used to talk about things like vacancies coming up in the street, and they all knew who was getting the vacancy in advance, except that they all had a different person in the frame for it. And one of the things that I soon noticed was that actually none of them were ever right. It was always somebody entirely different. So that was quite amusing to me at the time. And then when I left school, I was sort of, before I left school, I was still set on this dream of being a footballer. And when that sort of that avenue closed, I thought I better seriously think about a career. And the only idea I'd really got in my head was planning, to actually be a planner. So planning had a lucky escape, as it were. The only job I could get where I might be able to go into planning came from a response from the, as they were known, in the district of the Wrekin Council. And they had reorganised in 1974 in line with the recommendations of the 1972 Baines report, I think it was. And they offered me an interview as an administrative trainee. And that was to enable their trainees, they took 10 people on, to be trained in every discipline of the local authority and beyond, in order that we were very rounded as individuals and as trainees. But in between my interviews, I had to go for another job that I'd applied for an interview, and I learned a couple of things from that. The job was as a work-study trainee in a ladies' lingerie factory. I kid you not.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, that I thought that was. I've kept a few back, Ailey, and that's one of them. It was a source of great embarrassment at the time, and the only way I could make an interview with them was at the end of their working day, and at the end of my working day, I was doing a summer job in the local cheese factory, and so I turned up for this interview. You know, still very green. A bit wet behind the ears at that stage. And I turned up in my overalls for the interview, and also turned up stinking of cheese, I suspect. You know, and I think it's when you sat down and you're faced with a panel of 3 people sat at the other side of the desk, all very formal, and you look down at yourself in a pair of old white overalls and trainers, and then you see their faces sort of going like this, sort of, you know, that sort of crumple, presumably the smell of cheese. You know, it's a simple lesson to learn, but, you know, just in case you're thinking of it, never go for an interview wearing overalls and smelling of cheese. It's a big challenge.
Big no, yeah.
So when I got to Wrekin, you know, you know, smartened up, had to go through a couple of rounds and did this year, and I started. I was in personnel for a month, finance a month, environmental health for a month, and so on. And I think it was about March I went into housing, and I just loved housing. I loved the people that I was working with there. I took to people instantly. There was a rapport that there hadn't always been in some of the other departments. You know, it's like working in the library in finance. I couldn't have taken that. And so by the time I got to planning, I disabused myself of any ideas, and against my better judgment, couldn't wait to ask to go into housing. They even sent me on an outward bound course for a month in Ullswater to give me leadership. I didn't understand it, and they said it's to develop your character and build leadership capabilities. And you know, the further I've been away from that month's course, the more clearly I've seen what it was about and what they were doing. It was tremendous, and what it would cost now to send somebody on that, I do not know. The only other person I've met who had a similar experience was Tom Merthyr, who was sent to the very same place on an outward bound course a few years before me. So that I came to choose housing.
And so then I know that you were prevailed upon to join the CIH local board and started studying your CIH. Tell us about that.
Yeah, with CIH, it came about because, you know, the people around me as much as anything else. The job demanded that I became a professional in housing, and I had to join in that sense as a trainee, as a student member. But there was also a feeling from people around me that this was a celebratory sort of thing. This was a big thing to join the CIH. You know, you'll be glad you joined the CIH. The director that we had was a guy called Godfrey Oldacre, and during my time there, he became president of CIH. His deputy director was a guy called David Morgan, who was the chair of the branch committee for one of the years that I was there. And we appointed a new housing centre manager that I got to work for, and his name was John McHale. And a few years later, he became a CIH president. So one of the things I started to learn was, you know, who you hang around with is critical to your development. And it's sort of, for me, in my head, it coined a phrase, you know, which is professionalism is contagious. And that's really worth remembering. So the more good people you surround yourself with, the better. And even extends to one of my favourite people in the world today, which is the Liverpool manager, Jurgen Klopp, who says, when he's asked about his team, says that he just surrounds himself with good people. And it doesn't matter that he doesn't know as much as they do about their areas of expertise. That makes it even better. And I think that's a really big lesson to take on board. You know, don't worry about your ego. Just get the best people around you that you can. And John McHale in particular, who used to, he was unusual in that his ways of encouraging were unusual. It was like tough love, really. If something wasn't good enough, he'd throw it back at you and tell you in no uncertain terms. But another time, you know, he'd sort of metaphorically put his arm around you and give you a bit of encouragement. And he told me that I was going to be one of the first student representative on what was the West Midlands Branch Committee. So I said, "Oh, am I?" You know, and he said, "Yeah, you've got to apply for it first." I said, "Oh, right, what have I got to do?" You know, and he didn't give me any choice. I'd got to do this. It was going to be good for me. I wouldn't regret it. It was good for me. I've never regretted it. There were two of us. You know, what a time for my Skype for Business to tell me to update my. Yeah, the other person who got that was a friend of mine, Debbie Wheatley, who worked at Solihull Hull at the time. So the pair of us ended up later together on CIH Council. And it was a great experience. We were working on this committee with directors, chief officers, chief executives in some cases. And we were a bit in awe of them to start with, but they always involved us. And actually, it was that thing about, you know, we were hanging around with the most senior people, and that couldn't help but rub off on you. You know, it was contagious in that respect.
So somewhat similarly at Nottingham City Council, it was a requirement that I did the CIH professional qualification. And again, you know, when you think about the number of people that did CIH that have gone on to be chief execs, that have gone on to be presidents of CIH, gone on to really senior positions, because the network, you're quite right, the network and the democracy, actually, the democratic nature of that network is something that means you just kind of get it all shared with you, don't you, I think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I always think as well that it struck me when I went round a long time ago, but housing was so, and the people who worked in housing were generally, some honourable exceptions, very grounded too. So on the one hand, you know, you're looking at, you're trying to learn from some very clever and capable people and absorb some of their experience. And on the other hand, it's like, you know, an experience I had in our housing centre when I was put on reception. I mean, the great thing about that training, by the way, is that when they were short anywhere, people used to look upon it as, "Oh, you're being put upon. Don't let them put you there. Don't let them put you there." But I never objected, because actually it was giving you experience all the time. And if somewhere was short, you got better experience by having to rely on your own abilities more often. So I think that's another thing I'd advise anybody, that you get the chance to volunteer to do something new, something different, take it, you know, and learn from it. But I was on the desk, and it was the day that we had all the change of tenancies coming in. So people coming in the morning, getting their keys, and there was it was quiet in the afternoon, and this young lad of about 8 or 9 came in and said, I've got, my mum said to tell you that, well, I think I said first to him that, weren't you in this morning with your mum picking up your new keys? And he said, yes, that's right. And said, is everything all right? And he got this message he was desperately trying to remember, and he was bursting to come out, and he said, my mum said to tell you that she's got a pram stuck in her back passage. And I had to pinch myself, you know, not to laugh at the poor lad, because I found it really funny. But it just sort of seemed to sum up what it was like. You know, it was you've got to remain grounded, because the people that you were working for out there kept you grounded. And unless you are, you can't really have that trust and communication that is essential, I think, really.
That's brilliant. So tell us, so you've had quite a big international, well, so my president's year, it has been divided almost exclusively between our kitchen and my office here at Grand Union. When it was your president's year, you got to go a bit further afield, didn't you? Tell us about that.
I did, yeah. It was an absolute privilege, really, to be able to do that. I got to go to Hong Kong, and that's what I was expecting to have. People before me said, "Oh, you'll get to go out to Hong Kong." I thought, "Wow, this is," and I was looking. I went a couple of times for different reasons, but I went to Hong Kong, and it was quite a long trip, and it involved Hong Kong, Taiwan, Beijing, and Macau. And what was really humbling to me was the huge respect that people had for you abroad, especially in that part of the world. And I think that respect was built around our professionalism, and it was built on the quality of the qualification, the standard of the qualification that we were able to offer. And they just don't have anything like that. And that's the same in other parts of the world, like, you know, Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. And so there was so much to learn from people. And on that trip to the Far East, for instance, I got to go to Macau and see, you know, they're just wanting to show you inside the properties. It's still very, very small, but, you know, they're slightly bigger than those in Hong Kong, and they wanted to brag about it, you know, and they're very proud of what they do. But, you know, I sort of ended up at the end of my day in Macau, being taken for a drink to relax in a casino, and it was a model full-scale replica of the Venetian in Las Vegas. And you got planes landing every 5 minutes there, bringing people in from mainland China to gamble, because it is like the Las Vegas of the East. And it was amazing. It was about the size of a room, the size of 2 football pitches, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and every table was occupied. You know, it was a big gambling culture coming from mainland China. So that was quite strange. Taiwan was, again, I was able to observe a CIH, a local CIH meeting going on. And it was extraordinarily well attended. It was in the main city. Afterwards, there was a dinner. And then I got to present certificates to 34 students from Taiwan who had all been studying their qualification. And afterwards, they assigned to me on the table, so I could cope for the evening, a young lady translator, so that I knew what was going on at all times. And she was very, very helpful. And this guy came up to the table with 2 little glasses of whiskey. Apparently whiskey is quite a popular tipple in in Taiwan, and she explained to me that he wanted to take whiskey with the president. So I said, oh, well, that's fine. And then she said, oh, but you must understand, they would all like to take whiskey with the president, all 34 of them, which I thought, that's fine. But the problem was they all came up separately with one for me and one for them. And so I was thinking, 34. The only escape from that was that I think technically I must have had about 20 odd, because, 5 came up together. And then one smart aleck came up with 2 bottles of beer, one for him and one for me. And, I thought, well, he doesn't realise, but I'm playing my joker here. So bring it on. And it was a fantastic evening. And I believe it or not, I mean, it couldn't have been particularly strong. I remained remarkably sober. But, then we went to Beijing, and that was just extraordinary. And again, a mark of the respect with which CIH were held. We had a meeting with the China Property Management Company, and it was their chair and deputy chair, their chief exec and deputy chief exec. So the 4 top people in the organisation. And these people governed the whole of rented housing across China. You can imagine that, which is enormous. And I'd been advised not to worry, sit there and smile. The 4 guys from Hong Kong would do all the talking. Wrong. One of the things that you learn is that they're very, very generous when you get there. And so in the centre of the table was a huge bowl of fresh fruit, and I kept being exhorted as the special guest to take fruit. So, but every time I put something in my mouth, they'd ask me a question, which I remember vividly. It was very frustrating. And they weren't interested in the slightest in what the 4 guys from Hong Kong had to say. They just wanted to know what we were doing, how we did things. And it was all going very well until I got a bit carried away and started telling them that really about the importance of involving tenants and consulting with people. And, in communist China, that's probably is a revolutionary thought. If it'd been one of the Hong Kong guys, they might have been locked up for that. I don't know. So I got away with it. They treated me very well. But in between times, I had various experiences from, walking around, being able to walk around the Forbidden Palace, which was like nothing I'd ever done in my life. Walk along the Great Wall. And in fact, they do, by the way, sell tacky souvenirs at the side of the Great Wall. You tend to think of it as this wonderful historic monument. It's the only thing that can be seen from the moon and things like that. But there is some tacky stuff being sold there. So in that respect, it's no different in some ways than going to Rill or Blackpool, sort of things you can get there. And, just to demonstrate that. I was persuaded to buy a Chairman Mao cap, which I was photographed wearing on the Great Wall, much to the amusement of many of the Chinese who were passing by at the time. So I'll remove that quickly before Jill takes any more photos.
Photos, yeah.
I ended up that evening, I think, as a magician on stage in the Lauscher Tea House. Not as a magician, as a magician's guest. His beautiful assistant brought me on stage. I think I was stitched up, and I was blindfolded and then sat on a chair, covered in a blanket, and they disappeared me from the stage. I think I went down a trapdoor underneath the stage, which was bizarre. I later was restored to my full being, and within several hours, after enjoying a Mongolian buffet, I was taking part in a Mongolian floor show in which I was again brought up on stage with about 12 male and female dancers in national costume and 4 white horses And you know, it's the sort of thing you've just got to roll with if you're CIH president. And I'm sorry you're missing this, Aileen, at the moment.
Yes, I'm not sure how I would fare as a magician's assistant at all. But I do recall I went to the Laoshi tea house on my honeymoon. And so something else you and I have got in common. It was fab place. And through my work with the CIH, actually, we've had delegations of people from Hong Kong coming to look at how, so they were so the Hong Kong Housing Authority owns 800,000 homes. And I think, flipping heck, how would you, make sure that it was, 800,000 is a lot to make sure you're charging rent, you're repairing, you know how many are empty, all of that sort of stuff. But they do, you're quite right, they do no investment in community, and they had come to see how we did investment in community, and that was through CIH connections. So, and it's absolutely fascinating, I think, having the opportunity not just to think about how we influence housing policy and housing practice in this country, but how we can work with others to both learn from them and think about how we might influence abroad too. But so I'm hoping actually to get a visit abroad, probably after my presidency has ended, because otherwise it's just going from my as I say, from my kitchen to the office. So tell us more then about what the CIH has done for you.
Oh, great. It's done a huge amount for me, really. I think apart from the obvious things, equipping me with knowledge and information and great advice, it's been part of my personal development journey. I think without that, it's very difficult to see how I could have progressed in the same way. And I think that was something that I discovered, I rediscovered. I had a period of not being very active through various things at home, probably starting a family and all that sort of thing. But it was particularly, I think, when I moved to Wales at the end of 1989, and one of the things that I did at the suggestion of my new director when I changed job, he said, "Oh, there's a vacancy for somebody on the Welsh branch, as it was then, for somebody from North Wales." So I thought, we thought it'd be a good way of getting to know people across the country, and it certainly was. And I think it was then that it struck me, by putting something back in, how much you got back. You get back a lot more than you put in very often. And I think particularly after the presidential experience and the value I got out of the 18 months that I did, I felt that I would certainly never complain about my subs ever again. But it was, it's just that network that it's given me. There are so many people that I know now. You accumulate people along your journey, and your network just grows outward. It gets bigger and bigger. And there's always somebody, whatever problem you're experiencing at work, there's always somebody who you may be able to call upon in that network to give you some quiet advice, or increasingly now to just go online and find out who's doing that, how they've tackled it. And that's why I still value it. And that's why I think after standing down from the chief exec's role after 15 and a half years or whatever it was, I wanted to continue. So being on the governing board, I'm still learning all the time through that. And I'm also now the senior independent director at South Liverpool Homes as well, and on Merseyside. So that again is something that I'm contributing to and learning from, and from the people around the table. And I do think that's one of the areas that we need to start to push a little bit more on the professionalism argument, that we need to ensure that boards also have housing professionals at their core. I think that's a really big issue for us right now. So yeah, it's done a huge amount for my career, and I would advise anybody to be a member. Why wouldn't you be a member when you get so much out of it?
I think it is not just what it gives you, but your point about what you can give to it. And I think that's why I do this. And I absolutely agree. Homes England and the regulator both have strong cohorts of people who are CIH qualified. And I was talking to the chief executive regulator a few months ago, and she said, I can tell the members of my team who are CIH qualified. Actually, that's a real accolade, and in the context of professionalism, I think actually we will see more. It's a requirement here at Grand Union. It would, we encourage and support people to do that. I think the Knowledge Hub has saved us a complete fortune in legal fees. And so, but it is about the networks and the buzz and the ability to create that the ability to make things better by working together, I think. So you and I, Paul, share a real interest in well-being. My mental health, I'm fundraising and raising awareness around mental health in the sector this year. And I know you have a real fundamental, a real interest in well-being, both from a personal level, but also in an organisational level too. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it's very important in a career, particularly if you're going to give yourself strongly to that career, that you have other things first going on. So I've always had other interests. Writing was one of them. I always had quite a few interests outside of work, and enjoyed life. But nevertheless, there have been times where that working life can take over the balance too much. One of those such occasions for me was back in 1989, before I moved to Wales. I'd through a restructure in the spring or early spring, I'd not got a job that I thought I should have got, and it seemed therefore for me I wasn't going to make any further progress there. I needed to look at moving. But actually, it was the only time in my career I started to question whether I was in the right job, in the right field. And my wife, Kate, suggested that I did a careers analysis. And so I did all these it was quite early for doing this sort of thing, but I did all these psychometric tests at home, and then I went down to London and did more psychometric tests and interviews. And the upshot of it was that I was actually ideally suited for my career, believe it or not. Hard to imagine, I know, but I was. And they suggested one or two other things that I might be able to do, occupational psychology and things like that. And but the career into being a brain surgeon was going to be put on hold, while I thought, well, I better stay where I am. And there was a good opportunity coming along to apply for. But in the meantime, I was a bit down at work, and I had a real battle to sort of stay on top, be professional, do the job that I was now being sort of almost, I felt sidelined into. And at that time as well, again, apart from CIH, the other big influence in my life, my wife, Kate, who makes me do things against my better judgment, which always turn out to be for the best. She's got that knack. Wanted to learn to meditate. And I didn't really, I wasn't really that bothered. I thought I didn't need this in my life, but it was transcendental meditation. And the only thing I knew about transcendental meditation, TM as it's often called, is that the Beatles did it. and I was a Beatles fanatic, and still the Beatles. So I thought, well, yeah, I could, I once actually, housing, one of the great things that housing did for me is it got me on a platform speaking at an event for Welsh Government in the Great Hall at Bangor University, which is where the Beatles learned to meditate. And so I was going around taking pictures. And during this 1 week in April, beginning of April, 89, I learned to meditate over 4 nights. And it was only because Kate said, I'll pay, because that was the last barrier I put up. It's too expensive. She said, I'll pay. So I learned. And on the Saturday, I went off to a football match at the FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. And I was in the Leppings Lane end that afternoon when 96 people died around me, in front of me, very close up. And it was a horrendous experience. And when I was coming home, I was trying to drive out of Sheffield and on my own. And I just broke down, and I couldn't see to drive through the tears, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I remembered what I'd been taught during the week, that actually meditation can help calm you and help, breathe. And so I used it. I sat at the side of the road in my car and meditated for 15 minutes. And as a result of that, I was able to drive home. And I think probably as a result of continuing with that, and the impact it had on my life, I was all right. I didn't need any additional help or whatever. But I think it was probably the first time I started to see what events like that and like everyday things. I had a colleague, a warden, whose son died that afternoon, just doing the same thing that I was doing. And it seemed so unfair. And for that poor lady, her marriage ended up breaking down, and she ended up emigrating within a couple of years. So that started me thinking about, and I, not being sort of evangelical about it, but on people needing sometimes techniques or interests, things that helped keep their feet on the ground, keep their head together. And so that's why one of the reasons why I was really pleased to see you adopt mental health as your campaign this year. And then, going on from there, my daughter is a mental health nurse now who works in counter-terrorism in London, and doing a great job there. And her reason for going into that was seeing a friend commit suicide. And so, when you look around, we're all touched by things like this. And I think we all need to not so much guard against the impact on ourselves, but just help protect ourselves with some of the things that we can do in life. And so that for me became then, as I went through my career, things that might otherwise have rocked me or knocked me back, I tended to be able to absorb better because of what I did. I still meditate, I still practice meditation. Strangely, my wife's gone on and done mindfulness and other sorts of things and doesn't do that form of meditation anymore. But I won't stop doing that because I know it's good for me.
I meditate too, and I came to it quite late, but I find that it grounds me, enables me to have better relationships with the people around me. There's a whole load of benefits that I get from meditation. So something else we have in common: CIH, Laoshi Tea House, meditation, interest in mental health. So I'm happy to take any questions anybody else has of us. Have we got? I've had a quick look. I'm probably need to scroll back. But is there anything you're coming through on the chat that?
Yeah, there's a couple of sort of some observations in terms of membership and in terms of sort of examples of not utilising membership services, to its best. I think that was that Robert, was that you that had put that on there? Now, one of the things that we would like to do, and whether I think we'll probably run out of time today to do this, but what we can do is we can put the PowerPoint presentation onto this chat, which has got the details about membership. And certainly I'm more than happy to sort of stay on longer than the hour, because I'm not going very far anyway. But more than happy to sort of stay on and sort of about that and sort of explore some of those things in more detail. Interesting comment that was made by Mike. Mike, would you be willing to come on to sort of talk more about the experience that you'd had in terms of the job that you went for, that promotion, and sort of what had happened in that instance?
Yeah, no problem. I went for a job which was promotion, a job that my boss actually said I was more than capable of doing. And I went for the interview, and we went through it, and they said, "Oh, that's brilliant, thank you very much. Yes, you're very confident. We have got several other people who we're still interviewing," and came out of it. And they interviewed a couple of other people, and the person they employed had a degree in ancient Egyptian textiles. They were a member of the CIH. They had only been a member of the CIH for about 6 months previously. They'd only been in housing for 18 months. I've been in housing for 7 years, having done my MVQ, my HNC and HND, and I didn't get the job. And when I went and had feedback, they went, "You were more than capable of doing the job. We knew you would be a safe pair of hands. However, you didn't have a degree, and that's the reason the person got it." I said, "But what about the CIH membership that you encouraged me to go for and everything?" And they went, "Oh yeah, well, they've got a degree in housing, they're better qualified." And the first thing that person did was come in and then go, "Oh, can you tell me how you do this? Can you tell me how you do that? Can you tell me how you do the other?" And after about 2 months, I turned around and said, "Get stuffed." And they went, "Sorry." I said, "I'm not being funny." I said, "I like you as a person, and you're fine." I said, "But I'm not doing your job for you." I said, "You were promoted, you were given this job on the basis that you could do the job and everything, and now you're taking all my expertise and knowledge, and I wasn't capable of doing the job." And they went, "Well, that's not very charitable, and that's not very good." And I said, "Maybe." I said, "But that's how I feel." My boss at the time, who was also her boss, turned around and went, "I think you've got to support that person to ensure that the service delivery is done." So, having been encouraged to do the CIH, HNC and HND, which was all day release and obviously a substantial amount of work in the background to the day job, and having a young family, to be perfectly honest, it has not proven to be of any value in any of the roles I've done within housing, within the large corporate organisations that I've been employed by. I worked for what is now the largest housing association in the country, and they actually questioned why I needed membership. And when I wanted to go on to any of the road shows or any of the training, it was like, "Oh, you don't need to do that because we have our own in-house training," and doing that. I took redundancy from there about 18 months ago and now work for the Royal School for the Blind, and I'm the housing officer there. So slight sidetrack in my career, and I am so encouraged to go on training courses and webinars and everything. And I've just done a meeting today with the National Health Service regarding taking somebody from a hospital who's been in hospital for 10 years to actually put them into supported living and set up the service with the NHS in partnership with the C-Ability, which is our organisation. And immediately I was sort of talking about it, and the commissioner turned around and said, "You've obviously got a lot of knowledge in housing." I said, "Well, I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Housing." And immediately the whole tone changed. I was, oh, right, yes, so you can do this, that, and this. And it was, yes, and we need to look at this, that, and the other. And it was a totally different response from somebody looking outside of housing into it and knowing that they were dealing with a housing professional. And that was such a refreshing change to where I was working within housing, and chief execs weren't interested in the frontline staff. You know, I was at one office one day when they'd noticed, they served notice on us that they were closing the office and relocating us. And the chief exec comes and goes, oh, what fabulous office. It's a fabulous location, isn't it? So easy to get to. Yet they were closing it down, which went down like a hole in the head with a lot of colleagues. And actually one of them went up and said, you're a disgrace to the organisation, and walked away. You know, there is a huge disconnect, unfortunately, in housing between recruitment of people, the ability of the quality of people to recruit as well to do some of the roles, and what senior management are expecting. And I know that sounds very negative, but I think, you know, from a housing professional point of view, we have a lot of people who've come into housing and have climbed the ladder very quickly, but have forgotten what it actually means at the bottom end, where people are actually, you know, dealing with antisocial behaviour, facing the grief of the repair service not being done, having problems with rent collection, but targets are there to be met. And I think, you know, I'm pleased to say I work for an organisation which is actually putting the people at the front and actually cares for them, which is such a refreshing change for me.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, so thank you so much for sharing that experience. It's really interesting to hear some of those observations that you've made. Some of the stuff that I would sort of talk about, and obviously with Paul's experience, you know, sort of previously, you know, sort of, you know, CEO of, you know, sort of a housing organisation in the past. I think some of the things that is worth noting is that in terms of our professionalism agenda, Aileen's sound has gone, just seen that message. So in terms of the professionalism agenda, what you will start to see coming out sort of from very early on next year will be first of all our professional standards framework. So in terms of the work that we are doing, which will involve all of our members and the sector more widely, there will be a lot of work done around what does it mean to be a housing professional. And so that will be, you know, some of the stuff that will involve. A big piece of work will be about developing professional standards and, you know, within a sort of a framework. There'll be various things that members can do in terms of sort of assessing themselves against particular characteristics. So when we're talking about sort of respect and integrity and leadership and so on. A big part of this will be about the, you know, the drive for professionalism that's, you know, paramount in the white paper. And I'm not sure whether Aileen or Paul wants to sort of pick up on that, particularly, you know, sort of in and having been in very senior roles in organisations, because both of those would be in a prime position to be able to sort of talk about them as leaders in their organisations and sort of that, you know, which is the complete reverse of some of those things that you've encountered within, you know, sort of that previous experience. But there will be an awful lot that comes out which will help our messaging and that much wider messaging about how important housing professionals are in day-to-day life of everybody, you know, individuals, families and communities. So I don't know, Aileen, or I'm not sure if you sort of managed to hear what Mike was saying, but Paul, would you like to come in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I share a characteristic with you, Mike, and that is that I don't have a degree either. And I never experienced quite the same situation as you. And we're talking about, you know, quite a long difference in the eras to a certain extent. But if the working title of the book I'm writing at the moment will give you a clue. It's called I Should Have Been Revising. Mine, was a later recovery. I realised I was going to have to keep studying to get my housing qualification, but that actually, because I was also working there week in, week out, I saw the value of it, unlike some of my other studies before then. And I suppose the nearest experience I had was when my second role after I left Weeking was in a new town, Telford Development Corporation, and quite exciting, building and letting homes in a new town. But we had a change of director, and the director that I had there to start with for most of my time there was somebody from whom I learned an awful lot. None of it positive. So this thing I've said about, be careful who you hang around with, that remains important. And probably the best thing you've done is to get out of the organisation that you were in, and find your route in life, which is going to be a different one. This guy had discussions. He stayed there. We had one of those strange positions where the new director worked with the old director for 3 months before he left, and the old director must have given him the benefit of his wisdom, resulted in a restructure, and I was just doing the same thing. And there was some, there were one or two numpties who were doing quite well out of it for different reasons, and I was thinking, well, okay, I need to move. And I moved, and I got a third tier role at Chester City Council, local authority at the time. And when he found out, the new director called me in and said, oh, we haven't had a chance to meet yet, have we? Said, no, you've not asked to meet me, but your reorganisation's made it very clear that there's no future for me here. And he apologised and said he might have been a bit hasty because he knows that to get in where I'd got into, I'd have had to do, I must be good. Well, it's a bit late, to be honest, and probably a similar feeling that you had. And sometimes, you can't the size of the organisation you're talking about, it sounds like it's particularly difficult to influence how it works. Whereas maybe in smaller organisations, no doubt like where you are now, some of those, you're a bigger fish in the pond, if you like, than you would there.
I think the one thing it taught me was, I started my housing career in local authority housing. We went through an LSVT and became a small housing association, and then gradually merged with bigger organisations. And I think the one thing that has been obvious from the agenda is that housing associations want to get bigger for scales of economy, but those scales of economy seem to get lost somewhere along the line, and the actual delivery of localism seems to get more and more remote. For my example, I was based in West Croydon and dealing with sort of areas of Surrey at the furthest point away from it, and there was no opportunity for people to get into the office. The organisation I now work for is very small. I only manage 120 units of supported living. The difference being is that they range from Margate in Kent to Honiton in Devon, and from Seaford up to Aylesbury. But my residents can pick up the phone and speak to me, and I can get to see them within a week if they need, with juggling a few things around, if sooner if needed. And we have a much better relationship with our residents and our staff members there than we ever have had, according to what they're saying. And it's purely because of a certain amount of housing professionalism that I brought into it. My predecessor had no knowledge of housing in the professional bit, did things her own way. And now I've sort of been going through, and this needs to be done. It's like a simple thing like rent statements being sent out every 3 months. They've never had rent statements sent out, and suddenly they went out and it was like, oh, what's this? Well, this is what the standard is. And it's sort of almost, but the nice thing about it is people are actually saying thank you. And that was something in 17 years of social housing, I probably can remember about half a dozen occasions where I got said thank you to all members of my team. Whereas within about the first week, it was like, will you stop saying thank you? This is getting embarrassing. Smaller organisations, I think will respect the CIH and the standards to a far higher degree than some of the corporate bodies. That's just my observation.
I think,
and I think we're all different, aren't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
We're all different. You know, we really value, we're 12,500 homes, 400 staff. We really value CIH here. And I think in the context of this post-Grenfell world, and it's clear from the white paper that those larger organisations need to value professionalism too. And so I think what we're saying is the CIH is here to support that professionalism work and those professionalism ambitions, our qualifications, our professional standards framework. You know, we'll support, are supporting that, and are supporting. But each organisation is different. You can't legislate for the views of the chief exec. It's the CIH's job to continue to be out there promoting what it can do, and that's part of what we're trying to do today.
And that's evident from the apprenticeship scheme that we run at the CIH. You know, I'm an endpoint assessor for that, and seeing the quality of professionals coming through now over the time it's been running, is the standard is increasing all the time. The quality of the work, the sort of the divergence of some of the projects, not from just being, oh, let's do an antisocial behaviour leaflet, to really ways that are engaging with residents in completely different ways. And the benefits that's not only bringing to the residents, but obviously to the staff, to the organisation and the wider community, is really, really encouraging.
That's really great feedback to hear. It's really great feedback to hear. It means we're doing our job well. And thank you for the work you do. So Jill, I think it's over to you.
Yeah, sure, lovely. So Nikki, you had put a question about asking whether there was anything planned in terms of sort of more local events for members to be able to connect and get together. And I know that you're based in Aberdeen, aren't you? So yeah. You're still on mute, so I don't know if you do want to chat to me, but I'll just give you a bit of information anyway at the moment. So in terms of, obviously, since COVID, so for the last 8 months, we have moved over to virtual events. So at the moment, there's no immediate plans for us to go back to be doing face-to-face, you know, sort of imminently. But that said, we've got a really strong programme of our virtual events that we are hosting at the moment. So, for example, thinking about where you're located geography-wise, in February, we've got the Scottish Housing Awards. Now, the details of all of those are on the CIH website. And I think just if you scroll up in that chat, I think earlier on, Lisa actually put the link to the events and webinars actually on there. So if you have a look in there, you'll be able to see that it's free for members. So that will provide you, certainly in this, sort of immediate instance, that virtual networking that you will be able to do. So if you sort of pick up on that, there's also then the Scotland Housing Festival as well, which is in March. That is a chargeable event for both members and non-members, but members do get a substantial discount, you know, on attendance at that. And that is also, I mean, that is a fantastic networking event that just goes from, you know, sort of just builds on its success year on year. In addition to that, I think some of the things that I would probably suggest to you, sort of short of us having these face-to-face sort of opportunities at the moment, is to think about some of the stuff around making your connections through Twitter and through, you know, sort of LinkedIn, for example. So CIH Scotland is really active on Twitter. So if you want to, if anyone's on Twitter and wants to put your handles in the chat, we can sort of make those connections or to help you to make those. So there's a few Twitter handles that definitely are worth following, because, you know, I mentioned in the chat earlier about Aileen and Paul both being on Twitter and very active. So a great way to sort of network, build up your connections by connecting with people like Aileen and Paul, and also through our CIH membership and CIH housing Twitter handles as well. Lisa, I don't know if there's anything else that you can sort of think of immediately in terms of sort of that connection, you know, in terms of sort of the events and networking.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, I think you've more or less covered it. I mean, in an ordinary world, like you say, we would be offering free regional networking opportunities, you know, across the whole of England and in the devolved nations. And whilst everything's sort of moved to digital, I guess at some point in the future, you know, we would hope to return to live events in sort of various formats. So, you know, that could be just sort of general networking events or social events or quiz nights, you know, or it could be a sort of short best practice session or a half-day session on a particular theme or topic. But I guess, as Jill suggested, for now, just have a look at what's on offer through our programme of digital events. You know, they won't be attended exclusively from people just within your area, but it's still a really great way to sort of tap into that network of professionals and start to build those connections.
That's
And can I just ask, or just say to Robert, who said he probably hadn't maximised his CIH membership, well, what is it we can do? How is it we can support you? What are the events that you would like us to run? If you let us know that, then, you know, we can see how we can do that. But certainly we've joined our board here at at Grand Union, and they are completely loving all the webinars on our intranet on an almost daily basis. I went to a CIH webinar yesterday, and it was so there's some great stuff out there. But if we're missing something for you, then let us know.
Yeah, I just wondered. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah,
yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I wondered whether it would be beneficial to people if there was, you know, more local.
Oh, I think we're losing the connection a little bit. Oh, could you say that again? I think we missed
something bigger.
I think your connection went, Nikki, sort of.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. I just wondered whether it would be beneficial if there was little sort of regional, you know, networking events as well as, you know, larger sort of more national ones, you know, so that local people could connect each other and then maybe build on that.
Yeah. And we can take that back for sure, and we can also connect you up with Laura Fordyce, who's the engagement manager up in the Scotland office as well, and she'll be able to keep you informed on all of the things that are coming up. So yeah, we'll make that connection with Laura for you.
And what she's also said as well, because I had a sort of separate conversation with her, is that there is also still we in January, our regional groups and national groups will be starting the planning for those forthcoming member activities. So watch this space, and we'll definitely feed that back to Laura in terms of that interest there. You know, and in today's digital world, as well, even setting up, you know, those are so easy to do. Absolutely so easy to do. The other thing just to mention as well, just very last point, you know, I'm mindful of not holding people up, but our mentoring programme is a really popular part of our membership services. And it's a great way in terms of sort of that support to develop your career and build your networks and build your connections. Our mentoring program is fantastic, and it is really, is it like the golden thread that goes through our membership services. Up until very recently, not saying that this is the right thing, but that's the way that it had been. Our mentoring program was only available to those members who paid their membership fee. i.e. it didn't include members who were studying a qualification, a CIH qualification. That's now been opened up. So our mentoring programme is now open to all of our members. We're always seeking new mentors who are either chartered or fellow members, and we're always encouraging our members to make use of the mentoring programme. So all the details are on the website in terms of, basically there's a list of the mentors which sort of talks about the areas of expertise. So, you know, take the opportunity to scroll through that to sort of see if there is a mentor there that you potentially would like to be matched with, and do make the most of having access to that service.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
You're welcome. So,
Jill,
yes.
the only other thing I was going to mention, and I did put something in the chat, is just that Aileen picked up on it earlier around the Knowledge Hub. So just really to let people know that it is located on the new website, and again, it's a really good place to find lots of information on the latest housing issues, and you know, there's like in-depth case studies on there as well. But it's a really good place where members can share information as well about specific pieces of work or projects that they're working on.
Yeah.
There's loads of topic areas to choose from, and when you go on, you'll see that each of the topic areas, there's two sections. So there's a knowledge section which has got some key information about that particular area, and then there's a case study section which showcases some of the really good work that organisations across the sector are doing. There's also a new to housing area where you can find information about the sort of, you know, different types of housing, learn more about like what social landlords do, and learn about those key issues facing the sector at the moment. It's also there's a section in there as well about if you're looking for a new job as well, and how to go about that. So it's a really useful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that, Lisa. That's great. What the benefit, our Teams is set up in the way that this chat will still stay there. So what we can do is we can use this as an opportunity to sort of post some links. Aileen will put the links to both of your toolkits on there as well, which are excellent resources for everybody to be able to access. So we'll put those links on, plus we'll put the presentation on it. And if there is anything that you would have liked us to have covered today in terms of sort of membership benefits, then just let us know on that chat, pop your email address in, we can get back in touch with you, anything, you know, like that. So without further ado, you know, just thank you, Aileen and Paul, for your you know, brilliant session today. It was really informative, fun as always, you know, another good Friday morning. I'm getting used to these Friday fun mornings. So and thank you everybody for sparing the time to join us today. So really do appreciate it, and hope you found it beneficial, and hope to see you, you know, at another virtual event soon. So thank you everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Right, have a good weekend everyone. Take care.
Bye.
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 Cheers. Bye-bye.